Okay, and we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our weekly live stream. All right, I'm gonna start the countdown in about. I'm gonna start the countdown right now. Sorry, I can't speak today. All right, I'm gonna start the countdown right now. And if you're watching on the replay, feel free to skip ahead or feel free to watch the epic intro. Frankly, your choice. But I'll see you guys all in about 3 minutes here. Okay. So true. I'm telling you, it's now nationalism, literally the future of the Republican Party. You cannot stop it. Yo, look, I'm the baby now.
This monument will never be desecrated. These heroes will never be defaced. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
John, thoughts on Vince Down nationalism?
Oh, I mean, I've been campaigning that for the better part of 3 years now. Before I even knew Vince, it actually appeared to me in a dream, and I just have sort of been trying to like subtly, when they say John Doyle dog whistles, he does, but not the way they think. It's always about Vince Down nationalism. They sound like a white nationalist. No, I'm a Vince Down.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo as long as we are led by politicians who will not put America first. Then we can be assured that other nations will not treat America with respect, the respect that we deserve. The American people will come first once again.
Millions of Americans sincerely love Donald Trump. They love Donald Trump because no one else loved them. The country they built, the country their ancestors fought for over hundreds of years, has left them to die in their unfashionable little towns, mocked and despised by the sneering half-wits with finance degrees but no actual skills who seem to run everything all of a sudden.
Okay, and we are live. What's up, guys? How are we all doing? So before we begin the live tonight, I want to ask you guys a question, all right? Which lighting here do you prefer? Because right now what we have going on is like blue on the top, red on the bottom. We got a little bit of the red, white, and blue. I'm sure you can tell the lighting is a little bit different. We can either do that or this is just the classic lighting, right? This is just the normal like white LED lighting that we have. So let me know. All right, let me know down in the comments what lighting you prefer here, okay? Let me actually try to go back to the other one, but then that's going to have to... All right. So I'll keep it red, white, and blue for now, but let me know what you guys actually prefer here. Okay, what you prefer here. Anyways, before I begin, let me address the super chats real quick. Boston Graper says, thoughts on Matt Gagnon. I still don't know how to say Matt's name, by the way. I still literally cannot figure it out. We love Matt, okay? We love Matt. And he was a great supporter in the whole anti-anime crusade as well. So literally, we love Matt. We like Matt a lot, actually. And Matt says, I like Long John Silver's. Okay. Random completely out of context statement. We don't know the deal there. But anyways, guys, welcome back to the live streams. Here's basically what we wanted to talk about tonight. Actually, there's a few things we kind of have on the agenda for tonight. I know I labeled this as like the opening story, the lead story, but there are quite a few things we need to discuss, okay? But anyways, as we all know, last week, we had a very interesting live stream talking about what we refer to as the basement caucus, right? The Twitter neocons, okay? The people like Miles Edgeworth, Joshua Perez, right? The Coomer conservatives, the Coomer pseudo-intellectual, just generally all over the place conservatives. And we talked about those. I shouldn't even say conservatives, but, we talked about those people. I think this week, it might be a little bit interesting to actually kind of assess where these people exactly come from, right? Where does this line of nonsense come from? Because it's got to stop. It's got to always start at the top. It's got to always descend from somewhere. And that's exactly actually the topic of tonight's stream, which is the professional neoconservative class. Okay. And this is very interesting that I've noticed this week is the fact that you have people like Bill Kristol. Now, as you know, Bill Kristol worked for Bush, and Bill Kristol alongside John Bolton, these two guys were basically the architects of the Iraq War. Okay, so you literally cannot get more stereotypically, caricaturely neoconservative than this. Now, what I find very interesting and is really just kind of standing out to me, okay, is the fact that now you have the neocons, right? The neocons of the Bush era. People like, again, Bill Kristol, outwardly just coming out in support of liberal politics, like literally just down the road, down the line, not like anti-Trumpness, right? They're not embracing like the whole Trump is a threat to our democracy stuff anymore. No, these people are just like outwardly basically becoming Democrats and embracing Democrats on partisan issues. Now, we would expect this on things like, we would already expect this, right? On things like immigration, whatever else, whatever kind of serves the political establishment. But the one thing, right? What is the one domestic policy that historically neocons have at least been in principle and in rhetoric willing to take a stand on, right? And that issue has been fiscal conservatism, right? This is basically the one thing, besides building an American empire, besides invading foreign countries, right? Besides all that nonsense, the one thing, at least historically, that neocons have kind of somewhat stood for has been fiscal conservatism. It's like, oh, don't use the budget, right? Small government, this, fiscal conservatism, that, right? All this type of stuff. Okay. And so when it comes to criticism of the populist right, criticism of us, historically, what these people have tried to throw out is like, what happened to fiscal conservatism, bro? And it is also kind of like a boomer liberal talking point. Every single time, people like us actually suggest being effective as conservatives, what do you see the boomer neoliberal Twitter basically going on about? Fiscal conservatism, this, isn't that big government, this and that, right? Okay. So with that in mind, and with that kind of understanding, this is something that has really stood out to me because obviously neocons have literally just, this is the one hill domestically speaking that they've been willing to die on. I'm going to basically explain tonight why that actually all along was a fraud and kind of break this down. But I found this to be very interesting. Bill Kristol, again, architect of the Iraq War, Bush administration, as neoconservative as it gets. What is he now going out here and saying? Right, because you have this kind of, this issue where with a debt ceiling, right, the government might be running out of money and they're trying to still get an infrastructure bill done, this and that, right? So Bill Kristol, all right, looks like is now in support, right? And by the way, guess who he's going against in this is Mitt Romney. Okay, so Mitt Romney like a true neocon, like the only hill that Mitt Romney has been willing to die on is this whole fiscal conservatism thing, right? He doesn't want the government to keep spending all this money, and he doesn't want to basically raise the debt ceiling, this and that, right? So, but Bill Kristol, right, is now coming out here and saying, "Dear Senate Democrats, vote to carve out the debt ceiling from the filibuster." Okay, now your friend Bill. Okay, so this is very interesting because now you have Bill Kristol, again, ardent neoconservative, right? Ardent, as establishment in the historically Bush GOP as you can get. What is he now doing, right? This is no longer an issue of Donald Trump is just threatening democracy and American norms. Right? That's not really the angle he's taking here. Not immigrants and diversity strengthen America. The issue of like the budget, this is like hardline partisan in an establishment sense, right? Like the establishment GOP versus the establishment Democratic Party. What are they always fighting on? It's just budget. That's the only thing they fight on. They agree on basically everything else. They agree on the total raping of the American nation. But the one thing they don't always agree on is like, well, the Republicans want to rape America for $2 trillion, and Democrats want to do it for $4 trillion, right? So like the point I'm trying to illustrate here is that what you are witnessing through things like this is basically the emergence of Bill Kristol into just a complete Democrat, like a completely partisan establishment Democrat. This is no longer an issue of Trump or populism or this and that. He's just literally coming out here basically embracing partisan Democratic politics, which is interesting, right? Which is interesting because we used to think, or we used to kind of see it as this issue of fiscal conservatism, this issue of the budget, right? This issue of taxes and limited government, all this basically being the only dividing line between neocons and the actual Democratic Party. So that really then raises the question, why is Bill Kristol out here abandoning fiscal conservatism entirely and actually, now basically becoming a Democrat partisan? It's kind of interesting too. It's just to illustrate the fact that Bill Kristol, I literally don't think this man can get any worse. Okay, it's like the one time where we're actually dealing with really bad inflation, and the one time where like genuinely I would even come out and say that we need to like cut down on our spending. The government needs to stop spending so much money, right? Because we know the story with our economy, this and that. What is Bill Kristol coming out here and saying? Well, he's saying no, now I'm going to take the Democratic side, right? Now I'm going to take the liberal position on the whole issue of fiscal conservatism. Well, why is this? Okay, let me explain to you why exactly this is happening. The reason why Bill Kristol is now abandoning the GOP entirely, right? Not the Trump GOP, not like the MAGA movement or anything. He was never a part of those things. Now, Bill Kristol is even abandoning the Republican establishment. Let me ask the question, why exactly is that happening? Well, the reason why that's happening is because, frankly, even the what does a neocon actually believe, right? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But frankly, even the fiscal conservative angle, right? Even like the low taxes, low spending angle that historically, the only thing neocons have been willing to take a stand on, even this has been the whole time was something that was disingenuous and was something that they didn't really care about, okay? That is the truth. Neocons never cared even about something as like cringe and normie and establishmentarian in the GOP as fiscal conservatism. The only principle of a neoconservative is this delusion of building the American empire, right? That's all they care about. Literally, the only principle, the only kind of thing that a neoconservative believes is American empire, right? Not even a cool American empire, right? An American empire in the name of neoliberal democracy. But that's exactly what that's the only thing neocons have believed. So the reason the reason I bring that up is because this whole angle of embracing fiscal conservatism, this and that, and by the way, you guys know where I stand on this. I'm not really someone who has historically been a fan of defining conservatism only by something like fiscal conservatism, right? I've never been a fan of that. But it's important to acknowledge that the neocons only embrace this, right? Their core tenet, their core kind of principle here is American empire. That's it. That's all they care about. That's all they want to do. That's all that matters to them, right? Okay. So, but then neocons in the 80s and the 90s, actually even before that, really came over to the Republican Party precisely because that is where, right, the historically conservative party was kind of the place where they believed they could kind of infiltrate and kind of have their ideas and allow their delusions of, American empire to really take hold. Okay, so that's what's important to understand. That's kind of why they've been in our tent. It's not because they even believe in small government. They definitely don't believe in nationalism. They definitely don't believe in social tradition. But they don't even really believe, understand this, they don't never even really believe or at the very least cared for historically establishment GOP tenets like fiscal conservatism, like small government, right? The only thing they've cared about is American empire. And the only reason why they've been a part of the GOP for so long is because the GOP, slightly more so than a Democratic Party, historically has been willing to feed into their, their agenda, feed into their goal of American empire. Well, now what are you kind of seeing? Especially the due to the influence of Trump, and really, I'll give credit even to the influence of the Tea Party and the Republican Party. Well, even though you still have people like Lindsey Graham, right? Even still, you still have people like Mitch McConnell, and frankly, like most Republican politicians, it's definitely the case, and it's definitely something that you kind of been seeing on the meta level of things in the last decade or so, that the Republican Party. Not I wouldn't say the Republican Party. I think the Republican base, right, the conservative base, has slowly been turning against the neocons on this issue, right? They've slowly been turning against the concept of American empire. The Tea Party, for the most part, was actually pretty like isolationist, right? They wanted to cut down on the military-industrial complex, this and that. And of course, you have MAGA come along, America First, this and that, right? These kind of trends, these kinds of lines of thought that make the case more for nationalism and isolationism to an extent, right? And so I think what you're seeing from Bill Kristol is he's of the understanding that when it comes to something like the Republican Party, right, he can kind of see it on its way out. He can kind of see this wave, this trend. Kind of, you can see that the party he's associated with, the party he's trying to use again to build American empire, is starting to kind of turn on that, right? At least the base. And if obviously, it's going to take probably a decade to get those politicians out of office, but eventually you probably start to see the effects of the base not wanting this start to trickle out in political representation. So that's why you essentially see Bill Kristol becoming a Democrat, because Bill Kristol knows that when it comes to the future, right, he's already looking ahead, looking to the future. He kind of is beginning to understand that actually the vision of American empire is more suited now to the modern Democratic Party than the modern Republican Party, and that's where it's going to run its course. Now, relating that back to an issue like fiscal conservatism, again, this is something that Bill Kristol really doesn't care about. He's only kind of historically, I would assume, right, kind of been on the side of those type of politics simply because he just wants to be a part of the Republican Party, not to stand for fiscal conservatism, simply to build American empire. And if along the way that means standing for low government, budget ceiling stuff, this and that, right? He'll just kind of do that to go along for the show, right? But of course, now that he's basically switching parties again for this reason, this is what you're going to start to see him embrace, right? You're going to start to see him say, no, actually, fiscal conservatism, no. Let me actually get on the Democrat side of this when it comes to spending. Let me actually take the side of Democrats on these random partisan issues that I really don't care about, right? They're not important to me, but I'm going to take their side so that way they kind of welcome me into this tent, right? They kind of welcome me into this party. You see, that's what's going on here. Okay, that's basically what you're seeing. And now to let me check chat real quick so we can kind of see, react to this before I kind of go on here. DK says neocons have no standards. No, they actually don't. They only have one standard, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But let's see what else we got here. If Kristol lives in Virginia. Well, Kristol does live in Virginia. Yeah, Kristol has kind of turned with the state of Virginia, hasn't he? It's kind of true. Kristol had a debate with anti-war activist Scott Horton. Horton obviously won. I've not seen that. I'm actually kind of curious to watch that now. Didn't Bill Kristol endorse Gen Z GOP LMAO? Yes, he did. Literally, yes, he did. But anyways, okay, continuing back on to kind of what I was saying here. Let's actually kind of I think it's important to actually understand neoconservatism, okay? And this is something we talked about a little bit in the video on Monday, but this is something I'm going to kind of expand more on tonight, right? Which is to kind of, let's really grasp where these people came from, what they want, right? And why you're kind of basically starting to see this happen. But just to finish up, I will say to people who kind of point to something like, whoa, didn't Biden pull out of Afghanistan, right? Shouldn't Bill Kristol actually be more Republican now? Because isn't it Republicans saying he shouldn't have pulled out of Afghanistan, this and that? Again, it's important to acknowledge, right? The previous president, Trump, actually wanted to pull out earlier, which is something few remember, right? But I think also understand that really you need to draw back from simply one botched withdrawal. Kind of look at the grand scheme agenda of kind of both camps here, right? And you see it. The sort of neoliberal, neoconservative, right, kind of apparatus establishment, their agenda here and their agenda towards the future, I think these are the two prevailing lines of thought that you're going to see in each party, right? On one hand, you're going to have the thought that in the future, like I don't care how often Lindsey Graham and all these people try to desperately hang on to power. I can tell you that it is just simply an inevitable fact. It is an inevitable reality that the kind of America First line of thinking is going to start to dominate the Republican Party sooner or later. Like, it's going to happen, right? People know this. I think people understand this. And what you're going to see on a foreign policy basis is that sort of nationalist vision, right? That nationalist vision of, well, we got to take care of America first. Let's actually restore America to something that is respectable, something that is moral, something that is traditional, way before we start trying to impose the American empire and American culture and the American way of life on other countries. Because why don't we actually create a respectable American way of life first? Why don't we put the needs of our people first, this and that? Like, we understand that's the America First line of thinking. On the other, and that, again, I think Bill Kristol knows that, it might not be the case now that that's exactly what dominates the Republican Party on a political basis, but he sees the trends. I mean, he is a smart guy. Like, we'll give him that. He's not a moral guy. He's not a good guy, but he's a smart guy. And I think he understands, right? That is where the Republican Party is headed. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, right, I think what you're going to see, especially with the kind of neocons forming, this is very interesting, right? You're kind of seeing this new left-wing form of fusionism, right? Where it's like you're going to fuse like the standard liberals with the neocons, and it's going to come to this weird new ideology that I think it's pretty clear Bill Kristol is trying to form, which is essentially the global American liberal empire, right? That's what it is. And this is what you kind of see traces in when we talk about things like Afghanistan, this and that, right? It's this, because, there's this sort of belief in, number one, this hardcore ardent belief in liberalism, right? And they treat it like a religion, right? They kind of worship secular liberalism. But then as a result, this kind of grand crusade essentially to spread that around the world, right? We need to be spreading feminism, LGBT, like all this whole agenda of social progressivism, because it is just, because it is correct in their eyes, right? And because it is, the way of life, this and that, right? We're going to basically make that into the American empire, right? These false grandeurs of democracy, feminism, progressivism, what have you. I think we understand this. We've talked about this before. But I think that really that's going to be kind of the logical conclusion of American liberalism in a lot of ways, because, you look at it, number one, you take a look at the fact that liberals essentially now control every societal institution. Like, we know this is true. We know this is the case, right? Now it's essentially going to be a question of like, okay, where do we go next? Where do we kind of spread this next, right? Because we already have the corporations, the universities, the media, the government, this and that. Where do we go next? Where do we start colonizing? Where do we start imperializing next with global liberalism? Well, what is it going to be, right? It's going to be the rest of the globe, right? I think it spreads like a cancer, and I think that's the inevitable conclusion. Like, now that it's infiltrated every institution in America, what does it have to do? It has to start spreading out to other institutions, and I think that's kind of the goal here. And if we are to understand that at the core of all this is the concept of cultural Marxism, well, in the same way that with more like direct orthodox Marxism, the idea was the workers around the world, not just in one country, but the workers around the world would kind of unite, and it would be like this sort of global movement, this global uprising, this global revolution. Well, in the same sense, cultural Marxism, right, is going to spread in the same way. It's going to have the same post-national globalist sort of vision of things. Like, we know that's how it's going to happen. So that's all to say that's really why I think Bill Kristol understands that really when you look to the future and you look to the way things are going and you look to the kind of the end conclusions of the opposing camps and the opposing ideologies, I think he understands that his future actually is with the Democratic Party. His future actually is an alliance with a fusion, if you will, with the American liberals, because it is actually the American liberals that are basically destined to spread their crap around the world more so than the American conservatives. Even on a practical level, I think it's just simply the case that us as conservatives are really worried more right now, even if some of us are kind of imperialist in nature, are really just worried right now about trying to restore our own country. Meanwhile, liberals, right, they have, at the very least on a practical sense, more time, more resources, and more power to kind of spread around the world. Anyways, with that being said, with that kind of explanation out of the way, I think it's important to understand and contextualize why it is basically so easy for the neocons like Bill Kristol to turn on a dime and to basically switch parties and jump camps. And like I said, I predict this is what you're going to see in the grand scheme of things so easily. So to understand that, I think it's actually important to understand where neoconservatism actually originates from. Very interestingly, neoconservatism actually originates from Irving Kristol, who is, actually related to Bill Kristol, right? I believe it's his father. Don't mistake me on that, but I'm like 90% sure it's actually that was actually Bill Kristol's father. Sorry, haven't read up on this in a while, but I vaguely know enough to explain this. Okay. It's called we do a little bit of winging it, but no, seriously, the origins of neoconservatism. Actually, I should preface this correctly, because in my view, there are actually kind of two waves of neoconservatism, because if we are to understand neoconservatism to simply be new conservatism, right? That's where the word comes from, paleoconservatism being old conservatism, right? Then neoconservatism basically, in my view, and this is kind of the way, really, if we were to properly understand it, this is how it should be, and this is how I would argue the distinction should be made. Basically, paleoconservatism is any kind of train or school or its tradition of conservative thought that originates before World War II, right? That paleoconservatism, the old right, the old conservatives. Whereas neoconservatism, quote unquote, would be any type of conservative thought that is new, hence originating, I would say, post-World War II, right? So that is where scholars typically tend to draw the divide, right? It's between the old right and the new right, quote unquote. Okay, so that's to say, I would say actually the first neoconservatives, in my opinion, my estimation, and I know people would disagree with this assessment, but I think if you really honestly assess what each word is supposed to mean, it's true. In my view, the first ever neoconservatives is not actually Irving Kristol and Bill Kristol and John Bolton. In my view, the first neoconservatives were, and they're different waves. I'd say there's two waves of neoconservatism, right? The first wave really of neoconservatism actually, I would argue, comes from people like Barry Goldwater, William Buckley, right? And, eventually Ronald Reagan. I would argue that's the first wave of neoconservatism, because the modern kind of school of conservative thought, right? Conservatarianism, fusionism, that was a post-World War II invention. I think that's what's very important to point out and explain to the small government types who always try to say, well, if you don't believe in small government and low taxes and the NAP, then you're not a real conservative. What happened to small government, bro? That's an inherently conservative principle. Don't you know that free market and free trade is an inherently conservative principle? The answer actually is no. Okay. That whole concept, that whole logic of thinking of that's what it means to be conservative is not something that was the way it was actually historically perceived to be in America, right? That originates from fusionism. Okay. And now fusionism was something, it was a term coined by William Buckley, who is the original founder of the National Review. And he basically decided to kind of make this alliance, right? Fuse the actual conservatives, right? The social traditionalists, right? Social conservative, social traditionalists, which frankly is just real conservatism, with political libertarianism, right? So he basically fused the Christians, the social traditionalists, the social moralists, right? Stuff like this. Fuse that side with it, with, the libertarians, the neoliberal marketist, right, the small government types. And that fusion, again, this is something that happened post World War II. This is not something that historically has always been there in America, So the people who always say, well, the American conservative American principles are all about free market and small government. No, they're not. This is an invention, again, a new invention, hence why I would deem it to be the first wave of neoconservatism, because it is new. It is new conservatism. This is something that was invented after World War II. Okay, so this is neat. So that's why I actually try to argue that Barry Goldwater, William Buckley, right, those people that we are taught to idolize, kind of today in conservative thought, those are the first neoconservatives, right? Those are the new conservatives. Now, but when we refer to neoconservatives, neocons, right, in kind of modern context, typically we're not actually talking about those. Although I would argue they are forms of neocons. Typically what we're talking about is what is kind of referred to and perceived to be what I would say, again, is the second wave of neoconservatism. And this is where your Bill Kristols, your Irving Kristols, your John Boltons, your George H.W. Bushes, or George W. Bushes, sorry, H.W. to an extent though as well. That's where these types of people come from. Now, what are these neoconservatives? And when we're talking about Bill Kristol, where does Bill Kristol, as I would argue, we'll call it second wave neoconservatism, right? Because you have first wave feminism, second wave feminism, third wave feminism. Well, I would argue the same is true of neoconservatism. You have first wave, right? The Goldwaterists, second wave, the Kristol types, and then the third wave, I would say, is coming right now. And that's kind of the disaffected liberal types, which we'll talk about in a second. But the Bill Kristol line of neoconservatives, where did these people come from? You can research this for yourself. There's some books on this if you want to kind of read more into the origins of it. But to summarize, essentially, what we now today call neoconservatives are a camp of people who actually came over from the left in the 1960s and the 1970s. So these were a group of people who were basically disaffected liberals, right? Liberals, leftist kind of type of people, but who were kind of disenfranchised and felt disgruntled, right? Disillusioned with the state of the American left, right? And so these are people who maybe were kind of with it in the 1960s, and this is kind of where it all comes, right? In the 1960s, but they started to think things were getting too radical, too far. Some of them had ideological transformations. Many of them came over because, as we know, in the 1972 election, right, between George McGovern and Richard Nixon, George McGovern at the time was like a pretty hard left, right? He was one of the most radical candidates still to this day that Democrats have ran in an election, right? And so a lot of people thought this guy was too far left, right? And so you had a lot of actually people who kind of caucused with the left and caucused with the liberals actually kind of start to kind of move over to our camp a little bit simply because they felt things were too radical. And another important place to point out where a lot of this originates from, and you can kind of see the parallels today, can't you? Is actually has to do with the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? During the 6-Day War, right, which the sort of Israel-Palestine conflicts in Israel, but just between the Arab world in general, in the late 60s, early 70s, right? So obviously, as you can imagine, right, and as I'm sure you know to be the case, Brad Wood says, yo, can we get an early life check on Bill Kristol? I don't know much about Bill Kristol's early life, actually. I don't not very informed on that whole line of thought. So if you want to kind of explain in chat what on that topic, feel free to do so. But so we know, right, that it has been basically a post-World War II tradition of the American right to be the pro-Israel faction, right? And obviously, basically Britain and America are the people who set up the state of Israel, right, post-World War II. And so inherently, right, at the time, it would make sense, and this is the way it was, right? The kind of more patriotic, kind of conservative identity at the time, and still to this day, as you can see, whether you think it's that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? It's obviously the case that that identity, again, was something that was seen to be more conservative, right? And so that's to say, when it came to things like the 6-Day War, it was the American left who was, generally speaking, pretty pro-Palestine, pro-Arab world, anti-Israel, right? Saw Israel as an illegitimate state, this and that. Like, yeah, this actually is much older than you think it is. So that this whole thing is going down. Obviously, the Soviet Union was pro-Palestine and pro-Arab world kind of, during this time too. Because, if Israel was like this Western quote unquote power that, America and Britain set up, naturally it was the Russians who were against this stuff. Now, with that being said, you had many American liberals, many people kind of generally speaking on the American left who actually did not like this, right? They were actually pro-Israel in the whole saga. And, there's reasons why that is. Okay, there are reasons why that was. But regardless, you had many American liberals who, on the issue of the Israel-Palestine thing were pro-Israel. And they saw that their fellow leftists and liberals were actually anti-Israel. Meanwhile, they saw that the conservatives were pro-Israel. Well, that is another big reason besides George McGovern, besides the left just going too far and becoming too radical. That is also a big reason why these disaffected liberals in the 60s and the 70s came over to the conservative camp. Okay. And so that's all to say. That's where basically neoconservatism originates from, right? Neoconservatism comes from these disaffected liberals, essentially. Now, naturally, with these, evident by the fact that the disaffected liberals and eventually the neoconservatives of the time cared so much about this foreign policy issue and cared so much about America aiding Israel, right, in this foreign policy issue, right? Obviously, we get that. Now, at the time, you can kind of start to see, right? You can kind of see the origins of where this whole, neoconservative kind of global American empire agenda comes from, right? They care a lot about foreign policy, right? They care a lot about these types of issues. So, with that being said, right, the American right, the kind of the normal conservatives at the time, the original, I wouldn't even say the original conservatives, but just the kind of the conservative camp that had already existed, paleocons, fusionists, like just the Republican Party at the time, they didn't really bat much of an eye to this because of the fact that at the time, the original conservatives and the original Republicans also were hawkish on foreign policy. Why? Because of the Cold War. Right. This is the thing. Even people like Pat Buchanan, who we love Pat Buchanan, don't we, folks? Right. Buchanan was a Cold Warrior, too. Right. It was actually general conservative consensus at the time that, America cannot totally withdraw from the world because we have this enemy in the Soviet Union. We have to actually fight this Cold War. Right. We can't just, and we have to do it effectively. We have to do it wisely. But we do have a presence in this Cold War. We do have a duty to fight this Cold War, right? The Soviet Union is the empire of evil, this and that. Like, this was the consensus basically universally in the American right at the time. So nobody really noticed. Nobody really necessarily batted an eye to this type of stuff. Okay. And you're getting put in timeout, dude. You're just literally spamming the chat. We hate to see it. So with that being said, though, right, again, this is why nobody really noticed the influence of the neocons, because basically this is something that the American right agreed on, right? We all basically were in agreement that we got to fight the Cold War, and we got to fight the Soviet Union. We got to have this presence on the world stage because of the Cold War. And so these people caucused with Reagan, Pat Buchanan actually got along with these people back in the 80s because nobody really noticed, nobody really cared too much, but it was just like, it was kind of just whatever. Okay. And Irving Kristol, again, Bill Kristol's father, understand he was basically one of the big kind of proprietors of this thought, right? Okay. Now, with that being said, you come to the fall of the Soviet Union, right? You come to 1980, 88, 1991, right? The kind of collapse, the end of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union. That's when it starts to get interesting. And that's when you start to see the neocons start to divide, because there's the view of paleocons, right? It was the view of people like Pat Buchanan that, okay, the Cold War is over, the battle is done, we did it, hooray, Soviet Union done, right? And so now it's time to withdraw from the world, right? We don't need this anymore. We don't need to be fighting all these proxy wars and have this kind of global, whatever, right? It's just, now it's time to come home. It's time to bring the boys home. It's time to, the goal was never to build an empire. It was just to fight this enemy. The enemy's gone. All right, bring it all back, right? Back to isolationist, nationalist foreign policy. We're good. That's where the neocons, who again, very, very emphasized, right? Very, very, very focused on this concept of American empire. That's where they started to divide with the Paleocons. And that's where people like us started to really get pissed at these people, because these were people post Soviet Union saying, okay, now's the opportunity. And as George H.W. Bush actually says in a famous speech, now's the opportunity to build a new world order, right? Now's the opportunity to basically fulfill Woodrow Wilson's essentially vision of making the world safe for democracy, right? And so that's it's important to understand, right? That's where this all comes from. Okay, that's where this all comes from. These people, again, came to our camp not because of reasons like this, right? Understand that, right? These are not people who necessarily just converted to conservatism. Their goal all along in their kind of most important view, their most important vision, has always been this concept of American empire. And really post, again, Soviet Union, that's when this really started to come out. That's when you really started to see this from neocons. Now, if we understand that these people essentially are former liberals, really just liberals themselves, right? And these are people who just came over for kind of frivolous reasons like this, you know, it's not difficult. Vince, get mods. I do have mods. Where are the mods in the chat? Where are the mods in the chat? We literally do have mods. All right, hold on. I gotta go on phone to give moderator. I will grant moderators. Give me a second here. Literally can't talk about the origins of neoconservatism for 2 seconds without people not shutting the hell up. All right, Matt. There you go. Matt, you can get mod. And Taft, you can get mod. All right, cool. Make Brad mod. Yeah, Brad can have mod too. All right. And Thompson will get mod too. Can't talk about the origins of neoconservatism for 2 seconds. For 2 seconds without these people. Billy Long Revolutionary says, "Give me mod." No. I don't even know who you are, buddy. I don't even know who you are, buddy. So anyways, as I was saying, that is precisely why you will see. And again, if we were to understand that, you know, neoconservatives, they don't really believe anything, right? They don't really actually believe anything. And in many ways, like that's really all they care about, right? Is this American empire vision, right? All they care about is, you know, the spreading of American neoliberal democracy basically around the world. If we understand that this is all that basically the core exists in neoconservatism, and if we understand that these people literally are just former liberals themselves, and they literally just came from the liberal camp themselves, why should we be shocked? Why should we be surprised when the Republican camp, the conservative camp, starts to show the slightest fracture, right? The slightest kind of abandonment of the American empire agenda? Should we really be all that surprised when, you know, they're immediately ready to jump ship? Of course we shouldn't. Of course we shouldn't, because we need to understand this is really an ideology. This is really a train of thought that never had any real principle to begin with, right? And so, you know, now with that being said, right, this is something I talked about on the video on Monday, right? And this is something that I think really we have to be looking out for. So, you know, obviously I think we all understand what the neocons have done to our movement, right? We understand that, right? Hold on. These people literally just can't talk about neocons. We just can't do it. Anyways, so the issue here's now understanding that's where these people came from, right? Disaffected liberals, people who thought the left was too radical on some issues. Also understand today, here's something else. Here's another interesting parallel to draw today. You know, actually, I'll talk about it in a second. So we have to be aware, I think, as a movement, of third wave neoconservatism. Again, first wave neoconservatism was a little bit different. It was just kind of like people with actual power and actual influence basically just rewriting the meaning of conservatism, right? Okay. But then the second wave neoconservatism was basically this band of disaffected liberals and people from the American left. Some of these people were outright socialists, right, who just had a different foreign policy interests than most of the American left. You can research that for yourself. But now, now you see the third wave neoconservatives, I think, are starting to come up. And that is the issue of the disaffected liberal today. Okay. This is definitely a thing that I think we all agree and we're all kind of in understanding that we see. Now, let me say that it is one thing. I think a lot of us are former liberals, former Democrats. We were just kind of naive when we were younger, raised into it, and we just were exposed to conservative thought after enough influencing, after enough kind of understanding. We just came over to conservatism. You know, I'm fine with that. Like, we definitely need to be converting people basically to our cause. That's not what I'm against. But what I think we need to be aware of is the actual alliance with the sort of disaffected liberal type of people that you're going to see today. And this is the last thing I'll talk about on this topic before we talk about other things, is beware of what I would say is in many ways third wave neoconservatism. Because I know it is very tempting. It is extremely tempting for like anytime you see an anti-woke liberal who's like, well, I'm not really the biggest fan of critical race theory. Well, I think the left has become too woke. I'm actually against political correctness, or, you know, well, this or that. Or also, here's an interesting one, right? People who have turned on Joe Biden because of Afghanistan, right? They don't like the withdrawal from Afghanistan. They're like, oh, he screwed up Afghanistan. I'm actually I don't like Joe Biden anymore. He screwed it up, right? There are also people like this. Are there not also people like this? Of course there are people like this. Well, again, do you see the parallels? Do you basically see the same thing happening here again? You have today, and this is definitely going to become a thing, because definitely we know that the left has just become more and more radical. We know that there are definitely going to be people who are kind of like wary of it. They're like, yeah, you know, I'm pretty liberal on most issues, but I'm not really sure I'm a fan of this. Like, hell, some of you probably have parents who are like this, right? Because I noticed a big trend among like liberal Gen Xers and boomers, not so much boomers, actually, Gen Xers, who are kind of like, yeah, I'm like a Democrat, but the party's going too far now. Okay, well, I know it's going to be very tempting. And you're definitely going to see the Republican conservative push. You already see it to a large extent to basically welcome these people with open arms. Hey, Bill Maher, look at this guy. He made an anti-woke rant. Welcome him into our tent. You know, this and that. Even something like Joe Rogan. You know, I like Joe Rogan, but he's like, hey, Joe Rogan, he's anti-lockdown. You know what? Yeah, let's go. You know, we got the anti-woke coalition. We are the free speech movement. We are the true free speech coalition. And then, of course, also see the other kind of interesting part of this. You can also see, again, the foreign policy aspect of this, right? In the same way you had the divide in the American left in the 60s over the issue of, you know, Israel and Palestine and kind of the approach to the Cold War that kind of brought over the neoconservatives of the second wave. Now, what do you see in the third wave? What do you see in the third wave is a lot of people also kind of more opening up to our camp because of Afghanistan. You see the interesting parallel. You see the kind of like the foreign policy driven aspect of this, right? Both sides, right? Number one, the left is becoming too radical. And also number two, I am disagreeing with the kind of establishment of the left or the liberal establishment on foreign policy. Do you see the parallels? Do you see kind of what's going on here? Okay. And so that's to say, now again, back then, what did the conservative movement do that we now can basically suffice was a mistake? What the conservative movement did was they welcomed these disaffected liberals basically with open arms. They were just basically like, yeah, let's go, Reagan 80, Reagan Bush 84, like, let's do it, right? Welcome to the tent. And we know what they did. They train wrecked our movement. They made into controlled opposition. They basically destroyed everything that conservatism at least had going up until that point, right? We know what the neocons did, even again, if they made Ronald Reagan more electable, which sure they did, right? They added to the Reagan tent, they added to the Reagan coalition. But what did the neocons do in the grand scheme of things? Screwed everything up. Literally screwed everything up. Now, as we're in the slow and tiring process of retaking the movement from those second wave neocons and even really the first wave neocons, we equally face the threat of third wave neocons like the ones I just described. The modern disaffected liberal, right? The modern, well, I don't agree with Joe Biden and Afghanistan type of people. Again, it is going to be very tempting, because these are people who, yes, will give you more votes in 2022, maybe even more votes in 2024, maybe even, to an extent, permanent Republican votes, at least for the next few decades. But what are those people going to do? Like, what in the grand scheme of things, what is compromising your movement and compromising your values to welcome in the disaffected liberal, welcome in just the anti-woke free speech type that doesn't really believe anything else conservative besides that? What are we going to basically do as a result of that. Christian Lee sends a $5 super chat, says Morgan McMichael is cringe. She proved that last night. I don't actually know who that is. Who is Morgan McMichael? Also, Sydney Watson is also a cringe atheist that'll be single with cats at 40. We're not gonna bash Sydney Watson. Okay, I'm not gonna get involved in it, but she is an atheist. Okay, she is an atheist, which is convert. Okay, convert, Sydney. All right, no business being an atheist in this world. Do you? We'll talk about that later. Okay, we'll talk about that later. But no, we're not. We're cool with Sydney Watson. Okay. But as I was saying, right, these are people who, again, they'll help you in elections. Like they will probably help you win elections to an extent. Now, I do think there's something to be said about the fact that also to win elections, you need to be strong, right? You need to be convicted, because I think if you're weak, I think if you're too moderate, I think if you're too nuanced and too kind of accepting on things, you actually become less convincing to voters because you don't seem confident in your beliefs, right? I think there does need to be some degree of confidence in spirit and energy in order to be convincing to voters, right? Because that's the thing. I mean, I know sometimes voters look for moderates, but I think it's also the case that, when you look at someone who is moderate and really stands for nothing, how actually convincing do they seem to you? How convincing can someone who is too moderate basically be to you, right? So I think there is something to be said about that. But I think it's also the case, sure, more likely than not, they'll probably help the Republican Party win elections. But again, what are they actually going to do to the long-term health, right? The long-term state of the movement? Well, to understand that, we only need to look at history. We only need to look at what letting in the disaffected liberal, the typical, those types of people, right, did last time. Because it's literally, you're literally watching the exact same thing. It's like deja vu. You're watching the exact same thing happen again. And if you don't want a third wave of even worse neoconservative takeover of our party, just as we're just starting to get our feet on the ground and just as we're starting to kind of try to take back our own movement, that is the last thing in the long term we need. The last thing we need is them to come again, even worse this time, and like wreck the party even worse. Okay, so beware. And so I'm actually going to be of the opinion, and I know that I'm probably going to have to debate people over this. I'm probably going to have to, there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with this, who are more in favor of the Big Tent strategy. But actually, I would say, yes, in the grand scheme of things, it is preferable to sacrifice some electoral victories here and there to not make our movement so entirely compromised that in the grand scheme of things, we're just going to lose it all, right? The question is, number one, sorry, nose gets stuffy when I talk for too long. I don't know why that happens to me. But either it's like, number one, we compromise a few elections here and there, maybe. I mean, I don't even know if that's the case, but maybe. Or number two, we compromise basically the entire movement. And considering, really, I think this is our last chance. Like, conservatives don't have a lot of time left. We compromise our movement. We screw it up one more time. That's it. Like, that's it. We've literally lost. So I think it's very important that we actually gatekeep the movement. We actually not let the people in. And I think, again, when you understand where these neocons came from, where the second wave neocons came from, it's not hard to understand why I would be so against literally repeating the same exact mistake again. And when people give you a hard time about this, when people give you the whole, but the Republican Party needs to win in order to do anything, again, if you didn't know this before, let it be known now. Tell them about the origins of neoconservatism. Tell them all this and explain how, that's where all this came from in the first place. We're not going to do it again. We're just not going to do it again. So anyways, Christian Lee sends me $2. He says, Morgan was that TPUSA girl that was, so you spelled her name wrong. It's actually Morgan. Okay, that's why I didn't know who Morgan was. It's Morgan with an O. Yeah, I remember that live. Actually, Christian, you were the one on that live too, right? We're doing a little bit of trolling. We truly were doing a little bit of trolling. So, anyways, guys, with that being said, that's the main story of the night. That's the main thing we want to talk about tonight. But there's actually two other things I did want to discuss before we go to Q&A on the stream tonight. And the second thing I actually wanted to take a look at is this. Okay, so this really, I guess this kind of touches on the point I made a little bit earlier about, we're shifting gears, by the way, slightly. This is not super related. I guess in a way it's related, but it's not super related to the first thing we were talking about. But it does kind of touch on that point I made earlier about about weak rhetoric and how, if you're not actually strong in kind of your views and your beliefs, then, you're not actually going to be convincing. Actually, hold on. Give me a second here. Hold on, guys. I'll be right back. Give me 1 second. I'm going to hop out of the stream real quick. Don't say 7:14 or whatever. I'm telling you this is going to happen. I'll be right back. Give me like 30 seconds here, okay? Okay, anyway, sorry about that. I actually was connected to the wrong network and I realized that, and I was like, okay, I don't know if it's making the stream lag or not, but I'm just gonna play it safe here. Okay. So, anyways, we're back. Welcome back. But anyways, as I was saying, 7-Eleven. You guys are out here. Okay. Neoconservatism, third wave neoconservatism is basically the basement caucus. No, I actually wouldn't say that. The basement caucus is just LARPing off of the second wave. Again, third wave neoconservatism are, again, the disaffected liberals, right? The Cathys, we'll just say it by name, right? Here's who you need to really beware is like, Kathy Zoo's not really around anymore, but Kathy Zoo, I think, was a great example of that. Karlin Borisenko, probably the single greatest like modern exemplification of what we're talking about here with third wave neoconservatism, right? Again, it is the disaffected liberal type. That's who you need to be aware. Like, really need to be aware. So, anyways, 10-6, 10. You guys is not funny. Okay. But as I was saying, so, kind of hitting on my point about weak rhetoric, and this is, again, sort of unrelated to the last point, but this is a great example of one such thing that conservatives do just simply so ineffectively. And, we got to do it. We got to talk about it. You guys seem to enjoy it. So, we don't, I am a man of the people, but I think it's also important that it's like, I am not someone who has the power to set new narratives basically in conservatism. So all I can basically do is respond to the current ones we're setting and kind of advocate for the setting of new narratives. Well, here's I think a perfect example of weak rhetoric literally just not being effective on our part. Okay. So this is in reference to the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which is a great name for HR 1. Right. And we know HR 1, the most radical election bill in our country, seeks to nationalize elections for, the way the left wants to nationalize elections, and not even to be like the boomer conservative LARP here, but it is actually unconstitutional. Like it is a pretty blatant violation of, the state's authority to run the electoral college. But, so we know this to be the case. And we know that HR 1 essentially is, I would argue, probably the single most radical in modern history, and of bills that have basically made it out of chamber and actually made it to the floor and actually kind of been significant to an extent, right? This is the single most radical piece of legislation, that's going to transform America in unrecognizable ways, basically since the 1965 Immigration Act. Like, I would argue it's that big, it's that significant, it's that important, and it's that bad. Okay, so and I think we all agree on this. I think we know the story here, but. So this is for the tweet. This is a tweet from the Senate Democratic Party, and this is John Ossoff, Democratic senator from Georgia, talking about this. So, he just goes on this generic rant, whatever, about but the democracy, all this. But I find this to be very interesting. So they start off with Mitch McConnell's. Okay, hold on. I need to blow my nose. I'll be right back. Give me 1 second. All right, my apologies. Sorry, it was distracting me. It was literally just distracting me. Okay, so Mitch McConnell says that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is unnecessary. Now he's going to have this whole response in this, whatever. I don't really care about what John Ossoff actually said to this. This is what I wanted to point out about Mitch McConnell. So, again, we've kind of contextualized, you and me, we've contextualized HR 1. We've talked about how bad it is, how radical it is, how evil it is, right? How transforming of the country it's going to be. What is Mitch McConnell's statement on this? Not that it's evil, not that it's terrible, not that it's radical, not even that, if you want to even say it's like socialist, communist, at least that's a buzzword. At least that's something that, is actually condemning of this. No. What does Mitch McConnell say? Not any of these things, not how bad, not that it's bad. He says, what is it? He says HR 1 is, quote, unnecessary. Unnecessary. Not that it's like terrible. No, I just don't really think it's necessary. We probably don't need it realistically. Seriously? That's the rhetoric you get from Republicans on this. So this to me highlights literally one of the biggest problems with the conservative tent, the Republican Party in general, is the failure to actually use effective rhetoric on literally anything. Because now, what is John Ossoff going to argue in response to this, right? So, there's a reason why Democrats always start off by calling us very harsh names, racist, sexist, evil, fascist, whatever, right? Because they know that inherently that puts us on the defense. Now we have to defend against why we're not racist, sexist, whatever their stupid buzzword is. Like that's just sort of the trap they try to put us in. The trap that we are trying to put them in is not that this is evil, not that this is terrible. No, it's not really necessary. We just don't really need it, which, by the way, kind of first presupposes that it would otherwise be a good idea. Like, are you recognizing that? Mitch McConnell is basically saying that, had it not been from the current circumstances, something like HR 1, that's the implication when you use the word unnecessary, right? Not that it's bad, not that it's just a bad idea inherently. No, we just don't really need it. I don't think it's like the most important thing right now. So now, in defense to this statement that it is unnecessary, all that John Ossoff and all that the Democrats have to do is not argue that this is not argue, hey, this is not evil. Actually, all they have to do is say, no, here's why this is actually necessary. Do you see the disconnect? Do you see kind of the starting place? You know how much easier it is to argue that something is necessary against, someone saying that it's unnecessary versus having to argue that something is actually good when the other person is saying that it's evil. Like they basically have such an easier time approaching this because we're unwilling to actually use strong words and strong language and strong rhetoric on anything. And it's not, who is Mitch McConnell convincing by saying, oh, it's just unnecessary? We don't really need it. Actually, I would say all that looks like from just an objective standpoint, if I'm a moderate, I'm an independent, whatever, and I know, because the word unnecessary is supposed to appeal to the moderates. It's like, I'm not going to say really mean things about the other party. We're trying to appeal to moderates here, bipartisanship, this and that. Well, I mean, honestly, if I were an independent, if I were a moderate, if I was just kind of someone who is undecided, I would look at the Republican Party saying that this whole thing is unnecessary and really say, what probably kind of feels just to me like the Republicans just don't like change, or they just don't want to do this, right? And that actually makes the Republicans the evil one, because it's like, oh, here's this good quote unquote bill that the country should be doing, but the Republicans just don't feel like doing it today. Well, that's kind of messed up on the Republican part. I mean, how many people you think would draw that conclusion, right? Who don't really know what's going on, but they kind of hear these two words being used. How many people would draw that conclusion? I would argue probably a great many people. How much easier is it for the Democratic Party to defend against it being unnecessary rather than have to defend against it being radical, crazy, evil, not good, this and that? And this again highlights the ineffectiveness of weak, nuanced, moderate rhetoric, right? You're literally just not convincing. Like you're actually unconvincing when you refuse to label what you're arguing against as something, especially considering it really is that bad. You're not making a convincing argument when you're just getting out here and saying, you just don't really need it. No, go out and say how bad it is, and say all the bad things about this bill that have to be said. And look at the optics of this. Look at basically the optics of this when it comes to like the ordinary person. It's like, oh, here we have John Lewis, who honestly is really not someone I'm really a fan of. But, in the country is seen as someone who is positive, civil rights leader, this and that, right? But John Lewis Voting Rights Act, right? Oh, no, Voting Rights Advancement Act. So you see how brilliant, Dems are when it comes to naming things, right? John Lewis Voting Rights Civil, Advancement Act. And the Republicans are not willing to come out and say, this thing is a fraud, this and that, you're being deceived, you're being lied to, you're being gaslighted. No, it's actually just unnecessary. We just don't need civil rights or whatever anymore. Do you kind of see the problem here? You see why it's just actually just not effective? So, Nosegate 10-6, Sam Matson says, very funny. You guys are hilarious. You guys are so funny. But that's another thing I will say. America, literally will never be able to do anything effective. In order to first be effective, if in order to first do things that are strong and do things that are impactful, first we gotta at least have the mouth, right? At least, first of all, in order to play a big game, right? Let's at least start by talking a big game. You know what I mean? Obviously, the end goal is to play a big game, but at the very least, let us at least be willing to throw out rhetoric out there that is honest, that is impactful, and that is effective. Not that it's unnecessary, whatever it is. Like I brought up earlier, I know a lot of conservatives, especially center-right people, kind of have this this notion. It's if we moderate our message as much as possible, if we take the high ground, if we take the bipartisan approach, we'll unite everyone, and then we'll win all the elections and stuff like that. Again, let me counter that by pointing out to you that people naturally seek to, honestly, I know it's conservatism, we're all about ideas, bro. We don't follow people, we follow ideas, And in the abstract, true, right? Ideally, yeah, that's the kind of the way we want to view things. But we also know that's actually not the reality of politics, right? The reality of politics is about following people, following ideas, not following ideas. In fact, oftentimes, who do people get their ideas from? They get their ideas from people, right? It's people aren't just sitting in the woods like Buddha, right? They're not just meditating in the woods like they're Prince Siddhartha out here. I'm sorry, I read a book about it. I read that freaking novel for class, so that's the analogy we're going to use. They're not meditating in the woods about politics. No, they're getting their ideas for the most part from people, whether that's pundits, politicians, writers, authors, commentators. Ideas actually come from people. People get their ideas from people, right? And frankly, optics is a real thing, right? People get their ideas. People are destined to at least follow the ideas of the people who are convincing. And when you really take out the middleman of the idea, quote unquote, quite frankly, to boil it down more simply, people follow other people who are convincing. People follow other people who appear to be confident in their beliefs. That is just human nature. If this person looks, even if they really don't, even if they're winging it the whole time, people are more naturally inclined to follow people who seem like they know what they're doing, seem like they're convicted in their beliefs, and they seem confident. And you know how you appear confident in your beliefs? Do you know how people you make it seem like, I really am convicted and I know what I'm talking about and I'm willing to stand on what I'm talking about? You display that through strong, convincing rhetoric, because you know what? If you're constantly adding nuance and you're constantly moderating your rhetoric as much as possible, if you're constantly well, but this and that, let me say, I agree with what you're saying, but all of that type of rhetoric. If you are constantly doing this, inherently, naturally speaking, you are not going to be convincing to others, because the more nuance and the more kind of moderation you have to add to your own message, the less it appears to people that you are convicted, the less it appears to people that you're confident in your beliefs. And if you do not appear, even if you're super confident, if the nuance pill makes it seem like you are not convicted in your beliefs or you have no actual beliefs, naturally speaking, people will not want to follow you. People will not want to vote for those types of politicians. And that's the reality. That's the truth of the situation, because, people don't really follow ideas in the abstract. People follow other people. And in order to be a person who is convincing and people want to follow, again, you have to actually be strong. You have to be strong. You have to be confident, right? And using rhetoric like this makes it seem like you are weak, like you're scared, you're unconfident, you're not convicted in your own beliefs. It's not hard to understand, but it's true. So anyways, Noah Boyd sends $2. He says, we have a lib in chat. We don't care. We literally don't care. It's so true, though. If you're watching right now, be sure to leave a like on the live stream, for sure. Be sure to do that. So anyways, one last thing I did want to bring up real quick. I don't really have before you go to Q&A. I don't really have a take on this necessarily. I think it's just like important to see and to point out, right? Let me actually just go straight to disclose who reported it. We've talked about this many times. I don't think I don't really have a new take on this to provide you, but it's just important to know that this is happening because it does actually affect you, which is actually this. Okay. We have the U.S. federal government from Disclosed TV, who reports it from the New York Post. U.S. federal government secretly ordering Google and other search engines to track and provide data on anyone who searches certain terms through keyword warrants. You hear that, guys? Please stop searching based and red pilled in the Google search bar. All right, no more based and red pilled memes. No more other things. No more 8chan. Okay, but I like I said, I don't think I have much to say on this. I think we just kind of know that this is just the logical conclusion of the American regime, and we know that the national security, and we know that the whole kind of belief, oh, you can't touch big tech because they're a private company. Like, yeah, we know that's bullshit. We know that's a lie. We know that and even if they were totally private companies, I wouldn't care. First of all, let me just say that. But even so, we know that that's just not the case, right? We know that's just not the case because we can obviously see that it is the national security state who is literally working hand in hand, actually using the big tech companies as political weapons against political dissidents. And, in this case, who is going to be? It's specifically right-wing dissidents. We know that's who they're after, right? We know that's who they're targeting. And this is just, the continued conclusion of that stuff, okay, of what's going on here. We know it's true, and I really don't have much else to say. If you're willing to stomach it, don't use Google. Use DuckDuckGo. But I don't know how it entirely even works though, because if you're using DuckDuckGo on a Chrome browser, doesn't that still? I don't even know how all this stuff works, but it's just like something to keep in mind that this is happening, and something again for the libertarian types to understand. If we know it to be the case that our political opponents are literally weaponizing private companies against us, and like generally speaking against the crackdown of our speech, why should we not take the same form of action to protect our speech? And if that's to say that, they're literally using the government to crack down on conservative speech online, why should we in turn not use the government to liberate conservative speech online, right? To free conservative speech online? It's not difficult. It's really not difficult to understand. And, quite frankly, when you look at the extent to this, you look at the state of this, you look at how kind of far this has gone, really, quite frankly, let me also say that I'm extremely tired of these like half-baked solutions, whether that's the Florida, big tech bill, which I appreciate that they did it. I appreciate they tried to do something, but at the end of the day, it was kind of toothless. And really, I think we ought to be taken a lot further than that. But also things like repeal Section 230, which actually wouldn't stop the censorship and really would. It's kind of like a cope. It's kind of just a way for conservatives to justify legal action against big tech through the guise of small government, or like break up big tech, right? This is another slogan you'll hear a lot: is break up big tech, trust bust big tech. And let me say that I support that. I am for that. But let me also say the idea that if we just trust busted Facebook, it would end. Where do you get that idea from? Because you know what's going to happen if you break up big tech? You know what's going to happen if you just trust bust big tech? You know what's going to happen? Literally, you're just going to have a bunch of smaller companies who are just as left-wing, who are just as anti-conservative, who are just as anti-your speech as, because that's all you're doing. All you're doing is just separating this company that already exists into smaller factions. Like, what do you think is going to happen? How's that going to magically make these companies like free speech? No, you're just going to have a bunch of smaller companies who are ran by the same exact people who are just as left-wing. So again, let's just say what we need again is just a straight-out bill saying the constitutional speech is protected online, and people who have been previously banned need to have their account reinstated. Like that's all. That's what we need to be calling for. No more half-baked solutions. No more Section 230. No more kind of copes, right? No more kind of ways to get out of just looking like big government. No, what we need outright is this, right? What we need is a direct solution to the problem, not these coping answers. But anyways, guys, with that being said, now that wraps up what I had for this stream. So Well, we'll do a little bit of interacting with chat. It's called we do a little bit of interacting with chat. So let me actually close out Twitter, and we'll talk about this. By the way, shout out to Florida State. Okay, first win of the season. Let's go. Let's go. Congratulations. It only took like 4 weeks. Okay. So, we got this shirt. We're just going to bandwagon because, or are we not bandwagoning? Or are we Florida State fans all along? We're not going to clarify that, but we will say that shout out to Florida State for, actually winning a game. Okay. First win of the season. Actually, I believe the only college football team in Florida that actually won this week. So shout out to Florida State. Okay. Anyways, Vince, you should just read past chats. We've been hype. Well, the thing is, I can only scroll to a certain point. So let's see. The furthest up chat we have is from Jim Eagle. He says, "Everyone search Robert Kennedy Jr." Like that's the top thing we have. Ronna McDaniel is literally Mitt Romney's cousin. I did not know that. I will have to check if that's true. But assuming that I'm going to trust what you're saying, and I will, because that sounds like it would fit my worldview that Ronna McDaniel is corrupt and would and I don't like her. So that's not surprising. Ronna McDaniel is a fraud. I know Trump likes her because apparently Ronna actually helped him win Michigan in 2016 or something like that. But it's just the whole seriously. I know Trump's a fan of her too. It's the whole loyalty thing too is really what it is. But Ronna McDaniel has not been she's terrible. She's terrible. So Thompson Spence says I banned a libertarian. It was super based. You have my endorsement. Yeah, fear my mods. Fear my mods. They the mods are my KGB. Okay. All right. Listen, I have no anti-libertarian policy, by the way, officially. But you start putting up the cringe small government slogans. I don't know. The moderators might just yeet you out of the chat. Like, who knows? But we do have freedom, of course. This is the Democratic People's Republic of Vince Dow. It's true. Don't you know that? So, just got here. I am KGB based. Was it that? I don't know. So much nepotism in the Republican Party's back. Well, I mean, to be fair, there's nepotism in any party. That's just kind of the nature of politics, right? In any society, you're going to have a kind of political class and kind of a political elite where most politicians, not all, but most politicians and bureaucrats basically come from. Of course, the problem is, what is the Republican Party dynasty we have going on here? It's not coming from Teddy Roosevelt. It's not coming from Calvin Coolidge. It's not coming from Pat Buchanan. It's coming from not coming from Richard Nixon. Right, it's coming from or Dwight Eisenhower, right? It's coming from George Bush, Mitt Romney, Bill Kristol, right? These types of people. Is the stream staying up? I got here really late. Yeah, the stream will stay up. Don't worry about it. Hey Vince, I'm gonna go see you later, man. Stay based and remember everyone to vote Constitution Party. I kind of disagree with that. A Constitution Party. I don't know much about them, actually. They tend to be okay on things, but it really depends. Yeah, it depends on the situation. Don't just vote every time Constitution because, it just seems like they seem cooler. I think you have to actually kind of judge the circumstance of the election and decide if it's appropriate. Barron Trump will be president one day. The Chad Barron Trump. Barron Trump's not going to be president one day. Barron Trump's going to be Caesar one day. Okay. Do you understand that? You understand that it's not that he's going to be president. No, he's literally going to cross the Rubicon as a joke, as a meme, satirical. Do we do a little trolling? Barron Trump's going to cross the Rubicon, and that's how he's going to take power. He's going to have a 5-year reign where he's literally just going to fix every problem in America, And they're not going to like it. But it's inevitable. So you're not going to stop it. Dragon F says, I'm done with the anime debate. I feel like we settled this already, but I guess we haven't actually done it on YouTube. Oh, by the way, the Instagram lives from this week are going to go up on the members tab within the next 2 days. So if you missed debating Trey politics, okay, we debated Trey over anime. And if you missed the IG live from Monday night, which was a pretty solid IG live, and we, Talking about some great stuff. That's where the original anime take came from. That's where we did a little bit of Putin posting. It's called We Do a Little Bit of Putin Posting and Nixon posting. That's just the is that not the tradition at this point? Actually, here it always goes like this. It's like on YouTube, it's always about Richard Nixon. We always go on some rant about how Richard Nixon was goated, and then on Instagram, it always seems to be Putin for some reason. It's very interesting. But anyways, he says, hey, Vince, you say that anime is a gateway drug to hentai. It is, but it actually helps me not coom. Okay. If you say so, if you say so, hope that is the case. Nixon did nothing wrong. It's true. They framed our boy. Easy the Legendary said he literally had painted nails, expected to be taken seriously. It's true. If the whole painted nails thing really kind of vindicated my entire case about anime and what it does to us, right? And Marm basically gave my take. Like, that is basically my take on it, which is that I think anime is basically Japan's like final answer, final solution to win World War II, because it's like the revenge, because they couldn't beat us in the war, so they're gonna basically see. The Soviets did the same thing. It's called cultural Marxism. Well, the Japanese version of that is the anime invasion. If you will take this into account. Trey owned Vince on the utility of anime because, after all, something like art that is beautiful, anime is not beautiful. I strongly disagree with that. It's not exactly the most Western aesthetic we have. And it's 10 times better than what you see on Western media. Facts. Yeah, but there's also much else to it. And if we were to understand that the point of it is to push pornography, yeah, that's why the bodies are so exaggerated in their proportions. Have you seen an anime girl before, dude? Have you seen her? Have you seen the proportions of her body? What do you think that's meant to do? Why do you think they do that? It's for the sexual appeal, obviously. Why do you think I say it's a gateway drug to hentai? And I'm not, exonerating American television, obviously. You guys know I hate that too. But it's just important to be honest about anime and what the point of it is. And the point of it is to get you addicted to cartoon porn. And few will take this into account, but it's true. So, and that's true. Richard Nixon did oppose same-sex marriage. True. Vehemently. Just because something is 10 times better than Western media doesn't make it objectively good. I don't know if it's even 10 times better than Western media. I don't think either are good, but I think Western media has certain things that it does better than anime. Anime is just weird. Okay, it's just weird. Do I have to say more? Oh, not you, Chonix. Like, yeah, it's weird, buddy. It's weird and you're weird. And there's a reason why there's so many people with body pillows of anime characters and not so much the same with like Western stuff. Because it's weird and it attracts weirdos. Oh, kawaii. Like, okay, you're weird. You are. Noah says anime is to Japan what Volkswagen is to Germany. True. It's true. Easy Legendary says Trey is like, it's all about beautiful heterosexual relationships. Yeah. Again, same with porn, right? Same with porn. So, and look, as I'm gonna reiterate, I am the Asian in this situation. So, I feel like I should know what I should have some degree of, not to be identity politics, but I feel like I should have some degree of authority here, especially when I'm the one trying to warn the Western world about anime. I am warning you. I come from the East, okay? And I warn you. They're trying to make you gay. Okay? I'm just saying, Probably Nerdy says, Vince, how did you become so based? I think it's very easy to do once you separate yourself from slogans like big government sucks and just kind of look at where your country is. And also, I would say a big part of becoming based is to separate yourself from the cliche patriotism. Not patriotism, obviously not patriotism, but separate yourself from the cliche America's epic because we have freedom, bald eagle type of patriotism, and kind of separate yourself from that, realize the actual utter state of America and how fallen in a state America is. Then all you have to do is really kind of think logically about why America has fallen into that state. And then it's very easy to come around, right? And that's really kind of what happened with me. You know, I was starting to come around for a while, actually. But then, really in 2020, when, George Floyd, BLM, all that stuff happened. And I basically just watched society implode, which is exactly what happened. Just watch my country basically come undone on itself. And it really still hasn't come back since then. It was pretty easy for me to really throw out all the American exceptionalism kind of cliche conning talking points and really just think, holy crap, what the hell has happened to our country? And then ask, holy crap, why the hell did it happen to our country? And I think, anyone who's intelligent enough and is thinking honestly enough and is just being considerate and is just being honest, it's not hard to reach the conclusions, right? And I think that's why many people who go down that path all end up becoming, paleocons, national populists, national conservative, like, that type of thinking, because, we always get vindicated. They always get vindicated. So Nikado avocado equals rap. You guys want me to collab with the rap? Is that what you're saying? We should at some point. Honestly, I've been thinking of doing this for months and I haven't gotten started on it yet. I've been thinking of doing some interviews, right? Just kind of like interview style podcasts. But the thing is, I feel like so often the interviews are so boring and it's nobody wants to watch that type of content. So it's it has to be interesting. That's what kind of been my reservation on it, is I wanted to kind of keep it interesting and not become boring like most other interviews are. But with that being said, I feel like, how could you possibly make an interview with a rap boring? He's the least boring guy there is. So, all right, now that I've semi endorsed the rap, now everyone is just going crazy and about this. Skittery Diss says Vince do a podcast with Rep and John. We could do that at some point. The thing is, I feel like the one day, I'm sure it'll happen one day, but I want it to be filmed in person. That's the thing. Because it's just not the same. It's just not good trying to interview people through a screen. Whereas when you're physically with people, and this is why someone like Joe Rogan or Tim Pool will literally fly out people to sit in the studio with them and won't never do it virtually, right? There's just something that is just so much better. It actually makes better content when you're face to face with that person. So that's the thing. That's been my reservation about a podcast. There are certain small tier conservative influencers, I guess, who live close to me, but not really anyone of relevance that people would care about. So it's I don't know. I feel like something like that is better done in person at some point. So, face-to-face conversations are based. It's so true. I should be able to run a lemonade stand without a permit. I agree. Rare libertarian W, but a libertarian W nonetheless. As Sean McGowan. Well, this is what they always say, is it not? Most anime isn't over-sexualized. You've only seen the bad stuff. Yeah. Well, why is it that that's the stuff that promulgates American society? Why is it that the stuff that is the most prominent? Why is it? GoFundMe fly Rap to Texas. I mean Florida. I heard Rap actually say he might move to Florida at some point. So Rap, move to Florida. Don't move all the way to Miami, because that's pretty far from here. Move to North Central Florida and come up here and we'll make content. Okay, it'll be the junior version of Texas, right? Texas has a lot of things going on. Texas has Blaze, Texas has John Doyle, Texas has Red Eagle, Texas has some of the TikTokers. Texas has a lot of content going on. Florida, we got some. I mean, I think actually Fleckas lives here. I don't know him that well though, so I don't, but there is Fleckas. There's some politogrammers, but really we don't have a lot of our circle content creators here. So, sure, Texas has that, but real American politics and Vince Dow, we're gonna build the Florida empire, okay? But that's gonna take. Rap's gotta get out of Wisconsin, all right? Gotta get out of, that's where Rap lives, right? Gotta get him out of here. Gotta get him down here, man. We'll do it. There's literally a Culver's within an hour of where I live, okay? So, you know, you gotta do it. We got Culver's here. We got a few Culver's here, actually. So, you gotta do it. You gotta do it to him. You gotta do it to him. So, anyways. Miami is literally New York City. I've never been to Miami, but I feel like that's an exaggeration. I disagree with that assessment. How far is Miami from your place? Man, people always try to like calculate where I live. It's not that close. Okay, that's all I'll say. It's not that close. It's a drive that is theoretically possible. I am relatively young. I don't know if I have the stamina to really make that drive. I probably could, but I just don't want to be honest with you. I just don't want to. I'm just using that as an excuse. Petition to get Vince Dow to do a 3 a.m. challenge. Maybe. Actually, you know, I've been thinking about this. So I'm going to go to Florida's homecoming this week, University of Florida. As you guys know, I have a friend with a guest pass there who I use very often. Okay. Shout out the boy. I don't know if I can dox his name, but shout out to our boy with the guest pass. But I feel like actually a video interviewing drunk college students would be kind of funny. It would be content. I don't know what we would ask them, though. I don't know. Go up to sorority girls. Hey, thoughts on the 19th Amendment? Like, I guess we could do that. I feel like that's been done before. But give me suggestions. I don't know. I don't know if I'll do it. I might not want to do it, but I'm thinking about it. So let me know. It's not high school homecoming. It's a college homecoming. It's quite different. Sean McGuire says Vince the type of guy to call anime degenerate and then watch The Sopranos. Unironically, yes. The Virgin Kawaii Nacho-chan versus the Chad Italian Mafia. Are you really making the comparison with me, my guy? Okay. College ones sound cringe. Okay, buddy. Actually not the case. Okay. If you're not into college football, then yeah, it is the case. But you know, it's really not the case. They're quite fun. All right. There are a bunch of white libs. Okay, that's because I don't know where you live, but Florida is in the SEC. It's different. We're built different down here. Okay, the colleges are actually built slightly different down here. So that's not true. Actually not true. Okay. The SEC are primarily the schools where all the fuck Joe Biden chants are coming out of. Okay, for context, it's just not true. I'm going to live under a bridge in a bad neighborhood in Milwaukee. Well, yeah, there you go. So you're from Wisconsin, so your image of it is probably University of Wisconsin-Madison. I understand that. It's different. It's different down south. It's different in the SEC. Okay, so. You know, Bill Gates is consolidating all of the farmland for when the supply chain collapses. True. Hold on, give me a second. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Eddie says Vince needs to read a book, and that's manga. Is that how you say it? You guys are cringe. You guys are so cringe. Anime is weird and just weird, okay? And then let me just say that even if it's hypothetically not, the optics of your average anime enjoyer literally invalidate it entirely as an art form, okay? There is something to be said about the type of people on the aggregate in general who are attracted to certain things and certain genres and certain like cultural niches, right? And you know, you look at the people that are being attracted to anime. You look at the people who are promulgating the anime machine across the world. Enough said. Enough said. So, destroy K-pop for us, Chad. Unironically, we could do that too. Now, I don't think K-pop is as big of a problem as anime, but it is still a problem. We do still have to do something about that. So TVN64 says Dick Cheney should go to jail. So true. So true. Anime time can be spent improving our society, you weirdos. True. It's true. All the people I know who like anime have seen hentai. Exactly. You see what I'm saying? I am vindicated. It's a gateway drug to hentai. Now, for people who are like, but I don't watch hentai. First of all, you probably do. You probably do. You just won't admit it. Second of all, even if you don't, do you understand what a gateway drug is, right? A gateway drug means it pushes people for the most part to other things. It doesn't mean that every single person who uses that drug allows it to be, if it is a gateway for that person to something else, right? It's just that generally speaking, it's true. And generally speaking, it is definitely true that anime is a gateway drug to hentai. I don't see why this is so controversial. I really don't think it is. So, it is so true. Reject K-pop, embrace gospel music. No, unironically, I've been listening to a lot more Christian music lately. Even some kind of cliche Christian music. It's not all I listen to, but I think overall, it actually, I've noticed it definitely puts me in like a better state of mind, for that to be the casual music that I listen to. That's not to say that's the only type of music I listen to, but those playlists tend to, you ever notice days you listen to that type of music, you kind of tends to be a better day, at least mentally, right? Mentally, you're kind of just in a better state of mind, There's definitely something to be said that I think the music you listen to definitely does really like shape your mind. I think music is very influential. It puts you in a certain mood, and Christian music underrated. Is weed a gateway drug? Never tried it. I don't know. I don't care. I'm anti-weed regardless, because it's kind of a cope. Because the acknowledgement is that really weed is not that bad. It's just that it's gonna move you to other things. No, weed is that bad. Okay. Every conservative should be anti-weed, if not for the effects or anything, simply because marijuana was the driving thematic kind of force behind the 1960s liberalism that took power and wrecked our country to today. Because we understand, at least in the public sense. Now, privately, it started before that, but like in the public view, this stuff started at Woodstock, started with the campus hippies, all that. Like that alone should be a moral principle for you never to touch this stuff. Right? This is the degenerate drug that wrecked our civilization. And yes, we should be against it. And yes, I do support, I don't even care. I'm not even like, decriminalize weed. I used to have that take before. No, I'm not. I am pro making marijuana illegal and keeping it illegal. And frankly, I don't care. Because that is revenge. Okay, that ought to be the conservative revenge for what the potheads, what the weed smokers did to our society. Now, there's also definitely something to be said about why liberals like it so much. Yeah, it makes you weak, it makes you useless, it makes you lazy, it makes you complacent, it makes you less willing and less alert and less able to kind of push back against the system. It makes you kind of compliant in that way. It makes you laid back, right? Talking points you've heard before, definitely all true. But I think there's also something to be said about the cultural significance of marijuana and what marijuana did to this country and its effect on this country and its relationship with this country, And while it was the case that like the founding fathers definitely drank a lot of alcohol back in the day because the water wasn't clean, and if to understand that, I guess alcohol traditionally kind of has a more like traditional association with America, and it doesn't. Okay, weed rose under very particular social circumstances for very particular social reasons and political reasons, and it did very particular things to the people who used it, and the people who used it pushed certain ideas for a reason. So understand, like, that's the origins of weed here. That's where it came from. That's where it came from. So something to consider, something to keep in mind. Hold on, I got to change out my camera battery real quick. Shoot, it's over here. All right, hold on, give me a second. Vince, is this the call to make conservative art? Basically, everything nowadays is degenerate and meant to push you that way. I literally can't enjoy new media because I know it's propaganda. No, actually the case. Hold on, let me change out my battery before I give this take to you. But there's absolutely the call to make conservative art. Give me 1 second. The 1960 election was sus. So true. So true. Easy Legendary says, unfortunately, I have fallen victim to trying weed. Please never do it. It really messes with your head. Yes, potheads. Listen, potheads, weed smokers, people who are apathetic and would consider trying it, consider the words of Easy Legendary, okay? Consider the experiences of those who have done it before. Now, I've never done it before because I've actually kind of been against it my whole life, which was one thing about me. It was actually, for a while, it was actually an egotistical reason because I heard it killed brain cells, and I was like, dog, I'm a genius. I don't want to be killed, because I actually had a fear, like when I was a little bit younger, that it would, because it is a thing that it kills your brain cells. I had a pretty big fear that I was like, it would just make me stupid. So I've actually been anti-weed even like before I came into the. Now, with that being said, I was kind of pro decriminalization because I was cringe and I was a libertarian and I was a liberal before that. So, you know, to be like, I'm not going to say I've had this such a base necessarily stance on weed my whole life, but all right, we're back. But or are we? Psych, we are not back. Oh, here we are. Okay, but you know, take those words into account. But anyways, let's see. Vietnam War was a psyop by global homo to flood the United States with huge waves of immigrants in order to lessen the cultural unity of the U.S. So this is partially correct. Now, I would definitely say that the Vietnam War protests, right? That's kind of what platformed, that's what mainstream, that's what kind of enabled liberalism, right? That's kind of what really mainstreamed it. And really, and this is something I've brought up before, without the hostility against the Vietnam War, like social liberalism, 1960s liberalism would not have been as prominent, I don't think, as it was able to be because of kind of the optics and the prominence of anti-Vietnam War protests becoming a thing, right? There would have been kind of no like mobilization, no kind of grand moment where they gained credibility. With that being said, it's important to point out also, you know, the immigration thing really, I mean, that was 1965, you know, that's something that really was kind of disconnected from the Vietnam War. But there is something to be said about what the Vietnam War definitely did. So that's true. My brother is a pothead and he's overly violent and broken. Many such cases. We hate to see it. We hate to see it. And you know what else you see? Hold on, I'm going to blow my nose again. You know what else you always see from potheads? Okay, the very exact people who, ironically, hold on. The exact people who always claim that they are not addictive, right? Because if that's always the thing. It's like, you know, weed's not addictive, bro. And always like, you know, but it's because that is actually true. Modern marijuana is addictive because it has more THC now than it used to, right? But do you ever notice that you'll kind of always press them on marijuana? Anytime I criticize weed, you know what I always get? Every single time. The same response from the potheads. It's always, first of all, it's very hostile. They're very mad. Do you see how mad they get? Do you see how particularly defensive they get when you like criticize marijuana remotely? Do you know what that is? That's a defense mechanism. Okay? It's literally a form of coping because you're an addict. Like that instinctive defensiveness. No, I'm not. No, I'm not an addict. No, bro, it's good. No, bro, you should try it, bro. You're literally an addict. Like literally take a look in the mirror. You are an addict. Many such cases, okay? Many such cases. But anyways, to respond to that earlier chat about conservative art, this is very true. And let me say this. I think that part of the reason why the arts and the humanities in general are really dominated by liberals, obviously, today, and left-wingers today, is because of fusionism. Like, we actually screwed it up ourselves. The reason being is because, you know, historically speaking, I guess, you know, because of this whole modern notion that what it means to be a conservative is to be pro-business and pro-market and all this stuff, and it's all about money, and conservatism is all about our relationship to money, and it's like, it's so then naturally, right? And you see slogans like this. You see conservative organizations making slogans saying stuff like, you know, don't tax the rich. We want to be the rich, right? You know what I'm talking about. You see this stuff. So inherently, that has driven this whole conservative perception, especially among young conservatives, that it's like, don't do that cringe art stuff, bro. Don't do that cringe humanity stuff, bro. What are you, a libtard? What are you, a libtard? Don't you know you got to go, be a businessman, go make a bunch of money, be an engineer, stuff like that. And that's why, like the money making fields in or stuff like that, those tend to really draw more conservatives. Things like education, humanities, arts, those tend to draw more liberals, kind of because of this, again, neoconservative kind of new perception of like what it really, I guess, means to be a liberal versus a conservative. I would argue that if we could competently separate conservatism, again, from these false notions that conservatism simply is about some abstract relationship to the market, you find, and I think you really would come to the conclusion that actually things like the arts, things like the humanities, right? These are actually naturally, inherently conservative things to be drawn to. Because I think there's something naturally paternalistic, right? And that's why I would say I'm a paternalistic conservative. There's something naturally paternalistic about saying, okay, we have this society. It is great. It is good. But now it is time to make the society beautiful. Like there's something inherently, I think, conservative about it. And I don't know if I'm articulating it the best, but there's something kind of inherently conservative about that instinct. There's something actually inherently conservative about the recognition that beautiful societies produce beautiful things, right? Strong societies produce strong things. You know what I'm saying? And I think actually, again, there's this conservative misconception that our only relationship to the world is markets and this and that. But again, if we are to be like paternalistic conservatives, not fiscal conservatives, but paternalistic conservatives, we are to look out for our civilization, for our people. We should be understanding of the importance of things like arts and the humanities and things like this, right? Because these are inherently things that I think a true conservative actually, and it's not to say you can't be a businessman and stuff, but it actually is something that should not be a turnoff to a conservative to say, I'm going to work in the arts, right? I'm going to create beauty. I'm going to make my society beautiful. I'm going to create beauty on behalf of my civilization. This is something that conservatives are naturally drawn to, or should naturally be drawn to. And that's why I think, I think that's why I also think, like, you can really judge the spiritual health, the inner kind of mental spiritual health of a person based on like kind of what they see beauty in, right? Which is exactly why modern art is terrible. It is cringe, it is degenerate, it is hedonistic, but also it's just ugly. Have you ever been to a modern art museum? You see how ridiculous that stuff looks? You see how ugly that stuff is? Meanwhile, you go to a Renaissance art museum. Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference between something like Renaissance art, something like Greco-Roman architecture? Architecture, another great example. Classical architecture versus modern architecture. You might not even be able to really put a finger on it, but you can definitely perceive the difference. And there's something deeper and there's something more reflective about what those societies, what classical societies versus modern societies stood for, because you can see the reflection in that in the way they choose to create art and architecture and beauty and things like this. Okay. And so I'd argue the reason why modern art and modern architecture is so ridiculously ugly and just not good and just, whatever the hell you see in modern art museums and modern architecture, this is precisely because why? Because liberals and precisely godless atheist freaks are the ones who are now producing the art of our civilization, right? Who are the people nowadays who are majoring in the arts? It's your blue-haired, atheist, pagan, salt-worshipping, just spiritually unwell person. We know who majors in the arts. It's always people like this. It's always the free spirit types, right? Are you surprised that the type of art they create is godless, soulless, and ugly? Right? Are you surprised by that? No, of course you're not. But that's the reason why you have art like this. And I think, I think also, there's a reason why like historically Christian aesthetics are just so beautiful, right? You walk into some Catholic church that was built in like the 10th century and it looks more beautiful than like anything you see today, right? Like, you know what I'm talking about? The Hagia Sophia, which was built by Christians. Okay, I know the Muslims took it over. Constantinople. Long live Constantinople. It's so true. But something that was built by Christians, right? There's a reason why, I think historically Christian societies have like been able to create such great things, and historically Western societies have been able to create such beautiful things, and that's because there's something to be said about the soul of the people who are making the art and the people who are making the architecture. And I think architecture and art is a reflection of the health and the morals and the state of a society. So obviously today, if you have a society that is, unhealthy and ungodly and this and that, and is lacking of meaning, and that is hedonistic, this and that, right? Obviously, you're going to see art and architecture and things that reflect that. So what conservatives have to do, if we want to be serious, because I get it, college is stupid, the arts are stupid, but really, if we want to think long-term about things, you want to think big picture, we have to, if we want to make this society, this civilization great again, we have to, one of the big important pieces of that is going to be the art, is going to be the architecture, is going to be the beauty, and what that civilization sees as beautiful, Healthy civilizations create beautiful things, And I think when you look at some of the classic things America built, Mount Rushmore, the U.S. Capitol, things like that, Washington, those types of things. You look at, you've ever been inside the U.S. Capitol? You look at inside that rotunda, it's beautiful. Like it is a beautiful piece of architecture. That was reflective of a society that was healthy, and a society that was, in a paternalistic sense, was the more conservative, right? And when you go to, if you've ever been to Italy, I want to go to Italy one day, but if you've ever been to Italy, I think you can see the same thing. You look at the ancient Roman ruins, even, if you go to Europe, you go look at some of those like medievally built or, kind of older, like Catholic cathedrals. Like you can kind of just see the reflection of when a society's doing good, the things they build are beautiful. When a society's doing terribly, you get modern art. Okay? So I think there's something to be said, and I think there's something to be said about what the conservative relationship with art and beauty needs to be. Like, we actually need to reclaim it. It naturally belongs to us. Because art is meant to be beautiful. And, the left literally has no concept of beauty. They literally are unable to comprehend beauty because they are godless and they are soulless and they are ugly on the inside, and so they literally have no capacity to understand or to conceptualize what is beautiful. Hence why the art they create is literally not beautiful. You know what I'm saying? Like this belongs to us, right? It belongs to us, especially when you consider that we are the more religious side of things, right? So, it's a long-winded answer, but it is a topic that I actually do enjoy talking about. I think is quite important, often overlooked, but quite important. Conservatives have to take the arts. Not we should. We have more institutional power. We literally have to. Like to me, it's actually a necessity. At some point, I don't know if you do that first or you do it after. We can talk out the strategy of it, but it's a necessity. To have any hope at restoring the civilization, you have to restore what that civilization produces and what that civilization deems to be beautiful. So beauty is more important than efficiency, as Edmund Burke believed. It's true. It's literally true. And by the way, if you're going to say Edmund Burke's not a real conservative, Edmund Burke is literally like the founding father of conservative thought in general, And he understood that. But of course, now you have the opposite. Now you have the conservative, quote unquote viewpoint is the opposite. It's that efficiency. It's that markets. It's about making as much money, bro, as possible is more important than beauty. Why do you think the conservative movement of today loses to the godless atheist freaks? Why do you think the things we produce are so ugly? We should have never handed the arts over to the left because it doesn't belong to them. It's not supposed to belong to them, And as is evidenced by the fact that this is something Edmund Burke believed, and you kind of understand this properly, right? The view that efficiency is more important than beauty is an inherently liberal view. Right? That's a liberal view. This whole concept of markets over people, that's actually a liberal view. That is something that descends from liberal thought and the end results of liberal thought. And now that conservatives embrace that, I mean, what's going to happen? What do you kind of see happening? So, anyways, hope you enjoyed that little rant about beauty. I thought it was actually quite good. I thought it was actually quite compelling, you know. But anyways, Alex says, Vince, I'm the only one in my friend group who isn't a porn addicted coomer anymore because of John Doyle. We love to see it. We love to see it, King. And I've been trying so hard for months to try and get my friends to quit, but they just cope. Okay, number one, have your friends actually watched that video? I feel like that video is very convincing. Like I'll give John credit. It is a very convincing video. So number one, if they have not watched it, tell them to watch it. If not, and if they're just still coping, because one of the effective things that video does is not just like it shame you or whatever. It actually scares you, right? Because one of the brilliant things John, I think, did in that video is actually kind of make you scared of porn. Like, actually, holy crap, like this is destroying me, this and that, and things guys actually kind of care about, right? But if they haven't seen the video, if they have seen the video and they don't care, you know, I think I think you need to probably suggest that maybe the approach you're taking is not working. Now, I don't know if I don't know if your friends are religious, right? Because that's one part of it. I think the fear of God and the fear of hell, you know, is something that can kind of steer our people a little bit differently, right? But if not, right, I'm going to assume they're probably not, because I think most people are kind of secular nowadays, unfortunately. But I guess if not, maybe there's just other ways you have to approach it. You know, maybe other ways to convince them. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard. I'll give it to you. It's not easy. You know, it's like you can try. You know, it's not always easy to change a person's heart. You know, how do you change a person's heart? How do you change what a person wants and thinks? There are ways you can do it, but at the end of the day, like they have to be the ones who have to be willing to come to facts with it. So, you know, I would say try as hard as possible to make the appeal to them by appealing to them through things that they care about or that they would value, right? So consider how effective, I guess, your appeal is, right? I think that's one interesting thing to kind of take into account. Maybe the way you're appealing, and listen, they're addicts. Working with addicts is not easy. But I think one thing to consider, you know, maybe is you want to try to pick out the things that they find important and use those, right? Use those. So, free trade feels like a liberal policy. It literally is a liberal policy. It literally is. You know, in many ways, in the way that it's not a traditional policy in America. And the fact that it is actually the end conclusion of like original liberal economics, right? In the way that it values efficiency over soul, right? In many such ways. One of the ways I vindicated my porn addict friend was by shaming him, and it worked to an extent. I would also say they may just have been hiding it. They just will tell you that because they're scared. So also consider that. Also consider, are you genuinely convincing them, or are you just scaring them into not wanting to talk about it, but they're still doing it? Keep in mind that. But if the shaming worked, the shaming worked. We'd love to see it. We'd love to see it. Doyle is slowly converting Sydney patients as key. We hope so. We hope so. I don't know. I can see not being a Christian. I was not Christian until basically earlier this year. But I think that it's kind of always confused me how someone can be philosophically conservative and an atheist, right? because my religious view for a long time was kind of like more or less deism in a way. I was just kind of like, yeah, I believe in God. I kind of, and my actual, for like the whole time I was a conservative, my moral belief, and I knew this, I knew my moral belief basically was kind of God-centered, right? And that whole like enlightenment, natural rights view, like literally that presupposes the existence of some type of creator, even if it's not the biblically Christian creator. And like, yeah, most of the Enlightenment people were not Christians, but they were not atheists either. They were deists, right? They still, some concept of God was central to their worldview. How someone can be an atheist, someone who actively believes that there is no God, and embrace things that are philosophically conservative, I don't know. It's always been odd to me, It's always been really odd to me. I don't know. But I guess most of the people who do embrace it, though, a lot, and I'm not talking about Sydney. I don't really know much about what she believes, but I think a lot of the time it's like those types of people tend to be Ayn Rand libertarian types rather than authentic conservatives, right? So, God is important for moral code for me. True. It's important for moral code for everyone, whether we realize it or not, whether we accept it or not. It's always true. Like, it's literally always the case every single time. Speaking of atheists, thoughts on Sydney Watson and her discussion with John Doyle yesterday. I watched that. Yeah, I don't usually watch those podcasts anymore, but I actually watched it because all you guys kept posting about it. I was like, okay, I got to see this. And so I was on the bus because there's a bus route from my apartment to campus, so I do that because it's easier than trying to drive. So I was listening to that. I downloaded it before I left. Right, you could download things on the YouTube app, so I download it, and I'm listening to this on the bus, on the way to college campus, and I was just a lot of it. I was laughing, especially when it's really funny about that podcast is you have Elijah, right? Elijah didn't talk that much from the podcast, but when he did, he would just kind of interject and just like say something that was just like so like ridiculously funny in the context. And so I was doing a little bit of laughing on that bus. And I probably looked like an idiot just like laughing at this screen, right? But I did see that. I think John vindicated himself. Also, the whole like, I'm not a Catholic, by the way, but the whole view that like Catholics are not Christians, quote unquote. I mean, number one, I actually disagree with that, but it's also very odd to always see that coming from atheists, right? Like you know what I mean? Like they're the ones who have the moral opinion on it, and a lot of times it's based on very surface level, like literally just straight up misunderstandings of Catholicism. Like there are other, and like I said, I'm a newer Christian, but there are other certain disagreements I have with Catholic doctrine, and maybe we can talk about those sometime and discuss those and have a friendly debate over those. But the stuff like Catholics worship the saints, like, no, they don't. They literally don't. Like in like a 2 seconds knows this, Catholics worship saints. Catholics worship Mary. And like those types of things you bring up. Things like that's just not like that's just not true. Like I know as someone who's not a Catholic that's like literally not true. And that's where their understanding of Catholics not being Christians come from. Then there are other like doctrinal things that are like deeper and are true, and maybe you could discuss those. But you notice like that's always what they bring up too. It's like Catholics worship the saints. Like no, they literally don't though. They literally don't. Maybe there are other things you might be able to say about the concept of intercession, but the Catholics do not worship saints. And it's so funny. You always bring that up too. It's always like this: the people who have the most basic tier understanding of you're not a Christian or you're a Catholic. Don't you worship Mary? Many such cases. I'm not Catholic, but Protestants and atheists have such a bad understanding. I know, like I agree. They do. The poor Catholics slandered so like badly all the time, like in ways that are not accurate. You know what I mean? In ways that are just purely inaccurate. So And I agree. Catholics see Protestants and Orthodox members as brothers in Christ. I don't know if that's always the case with Protestants, vice versa, but I do. I do. I see all like three camps as brothers in Christ. So some reciprocation would be nice. Well, to be fair, you're talking about atheists here. Okay? You're talking about an atheist. So, who cares what they see? But like, yeah, I see Catholics and I see Orthodox as brothers in Christ. I do. I don't see Mormons as brothers in Christ. Okay, I know that's gonna make some people upset. Okay, but Mormons believe things that like inherently are not Christian. Such as the belief that God was once man and then became God, and they don't believe in one God. They actually believe in multiple gods, right? You know what I mean? So I wouldn't say Mormons. I personally don't consider Mormons to be Christian. Now, let me say that I am not as in a political sense and just like a real life sense. I'm not anti-Mormon. I know a lot of great Mormons, and I have found Mormons tend to be very strong allies of our movement. Okay, so don't take it the wrong way. We love Mormons. We're not anti-Mormon. Now, we think that Mormons need to right their course, right? They need to change what they believe. They need to come to the true Christ. But we're not actually like anti. Like I don't have like personal problems with Mormons. I have, I do have theological problems with them, but I find them to be actually very like pretty good people. And I find it to be the case a lot of times, it's just kind of how they're raised and they don't really question and think much of it. But with that being said, and it's not the polygamy, okay? That's not like I know this whole thing. I don't even know. I'm actually talking about Mormon doctrine. Mormon doctrine is not Christian. But with that being said, I do see Mormons as brothers in this movement. Okay, I will say that. I don't see them as brothers in Christ, but I will say Mormons. I've had a very good experience with a lot of you guys who are Mormon, who are like very with us in the movement and really get it, and we can debate theology outside. But I do see them as political allies. I will say that to an extent. Obviously, we have Mitt Romney. Obviously, have people like that. We also have a lot of base Mormons out there. We have a lot of them. So. Who said my audio is off? Are you trolling? I don't think anyone else is saying that. Are you doing a little bit of trolling? Are you doing a little bit of trolling here? Alex says, Vince, come to UCLA and speak to the Bruin Republicans. That would be dope. Or maybe an APS summit or something similar. I don't know if we'd ever do an APU event in California. I don't know if we can. It's like a logistical nightmare with all the you-know-what. But yeah, I would be willing. Just tell... I'm assuming you go to UCLA. I'm assuming that's why you bring that up. Let's just set it up. Yeah, tell the GOP there to let's set it up. I know a few people go to UCLA. I think we've had some interaction with the Bruin Republicans before. I like you guys' chapter. I've seen some of you guys' stuff. Very base chapter. We love to see it. So just let me know. Let's set it up. Like I said, I'm going to assume we go to UCLA. Reach out to them, and let's do it. We could either do Zoom, which is cheaper for you guys, or we could do a physical event. I'm fine with either. But we could definitely do that. And by the way, if any of you guys are in college or high school and you have chapters on campus, college Republicans, even like Turning Point, YAF, Bull Moose Party, like whatever you guys have, and you want me to come speak at your campus, set it up. Talk to your club president. If you are the club president, let's do it. And talk to me. You can email me. You can message me. Ask me on Snapchat, actually. Snapchat's in the description if you want to set that up. But, Trapticon says Southern Baptist churches are very based. True. It's true. It's true. Jim Eagle says, why are so many Catholics Democrats? I think it's the issue of kind of casual Christianity. And now, to be fair to Catholics, I think that Protestants have an equal, if not a greater problem with the phenomenon of casual, unserious Christians who are kind of just Christian in name. I think the difference with Protestants, and the reason why even the casual Christian Protestants tend to be Republican, is because they tend to come from, like we mentioned earlier, Southern Baptist, right? So if you're like a casual Christian, but you're like a Southern Baptist, still just like culturally, you're going to be influenced kind of to be a Republican, and kind of be a conservative. And so that's, meanwhile, like with the Catholicism in America, it's just more complicated than that, because it's like the religious Catholics, like people who are actually like genuinely Catholic, like actually austerely Catholic, I should say, always Republican, always conservative. Well, not always Republican, but always conservative, right? The problem is, you have the kind of the casual Catholics, and what demographic groups in America tend to be Catholic. I guess the Irish, the Irish count as one, but I would say like prominently, it's a lot of times, what is it? It's actually, when you look at the numbers, Hispanics, right? The Hispanics, Italians, those types of groups. And these are ethnic groups that, culturally speaking, tend to vote Democrat, just traditionally. And so, like, when it comes up in numbers, polling Catholics, how do these people vote? You're going to see that phenomenon of the casual Catholics, because when it comes to Christianity, in general, not obviously not always, but in general, Protestantism tends to be more white, right? Whereas because in America, just the reality of all that stuff, right? Immigration, all that. There are a lot of white Catholics, obviously, but also Catholics, also a lot of the immigrant groups that come into America tend to be Catholic, right? And so it's just the reality that it's like, when you're polling Catholics, you're going to get a lot of that represented in it. So that I think that's why, by numbers, you see a lot of Catholic Democrats, right? Now, that being said, austere Catholics, I never really found a actually religious Catholic that is liberal ever. I found Joe Biden type of Catholics, and I found just performative Catholics. So don't forget the Filipinos across the North China Sea. Actually, Filipinos, I believe, tend to actually vote more Republican, but I definitely understand your point. California Catholics, great example, right? I think California is actually majority Catholic when it comes to religion. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's like more, not a lot of Protestants in California, to be honest. So, that's going to show up. That's obviously going to show up in the numbers. So, good night, gentlemen. Dow 2040. We love to see it. We love to see it. Bio says, I disagree. I only listen about Christianity from Bryson Gray. Nobody else. Bryson's great. We love Bryson, don't we, folks? Vince-Down nationalism is inevitable. It's so true. It's so true. I've seen more Catholic churches in Cali. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a majority Hispanic state. It's a very ethnically diverse state. Even a lot of whites there tend to be immigrant group whites, which, I mean, Protestantism is really something that's only unique to, at least on a global scale, right? For the most part, it's really only unique to the places that were influenced by Britain, So when it comes to immigration, assuming they are Christian from around the world, you're usually going to be getting Catholic immigrants, not Protestant immigrants. So that'll come up in things, you know what I mean? Frankie Nutcracker says Pope John Paul II was pretty based. He was. I'll give the Catholics credit. We love Pope John Paul II. But the current Pope is, yeah. That's the thing. And I know Catholics tend to like have different views on this, but I find that, there's one Catholic I sometimes interact with, and I think if you're of the understanding that, I mean, the current Pope is just not, we don't like the current Pope, do we? Well, there's kind of this Catholic divide on like whether or not you're allowed to like firmly criticize the Pope, because I remember seeing the other day, it was like there was a lot of just criticism of Pope Francis, all this stuff, and this guy who's like a conservative Catholic, but he said something along the lines of like, and I know this is a view of a lot of Catholics, which is that the Pope is not just like some politician you can just like throw under the bus. He sits on the chair of Peter. which is one thing I disagree with. That's one someone asked earlier in the chat. One place I disagree with in Catholic theology, or not Catholic theology, that Catholic doctrine. The Peter being the original pope is one place I'm not really in agreement there. But basically the idea that, you know, because this is someone that in their eyes sits on the chair of Peter, you know, is not someone really we're meant to like be super critical of, you know, kind of have to like kind of watch our mouth around them. And that's I don't know, that's a divide I've noticed in Catholics. It's interesting. So gift of Vince Dow. What is Vince Dow's? True. Thoughts on Mormonism. I gave my thoughts on Mormons earlier. You can watch it in the replay. Again, wonderful people from my experience. Really wonderful people. I don't view them as Christian. That's what I'll say about them, you know. From my understanding and from what I've seen, you know, they kind of somewhat believe in like the Christian God and the Christian Trinity, but only to an extent, you know, like they don't, first of all, they think God first was man and then became God. And, you know, there's just all this weirdness. They're polytheistic. Like they don't believe in only one God. To my understanding, they only worship the Father, right? They don't worship all three persons of the Trinity. As it's only the Father that Mormons worship, right? It's all over the place. But I don't view Mormons to be Christians. Okay, I don't. Now, again, with that being said, I'm not anti. I don't dislike them as people. You know, like I've said, I found that Mormons have been very beneficial, specifically to our side of the movement. Now, I know obviously there's also like Mitt Romney types, but like, you know, because Mormons, just socially speaking, tend to be pretty traditional on a lot of things, like they actually get it, you know what I mean? And I've had very good experiences with them. But doctrinally speaking, disagree. So, you know, favorite John Wayne movie. I don't think I've seen enough John Wayne movies to make that assessment. Ascension Presents has brought me to Catholicism. No, Father Mike. I like Father Mike. All right, we're cool with Father Mike. But I will say that a different guy, Mike Winger, he actually kind of is what brought me over more to Protestantism. So I'll say that. I will say that. Okay, I would say it's probably it's the influence of that combined with just the fact that I guess I do hang around mostly like Southern Baptists. So, but you guys want to know where I get, like, I don't cult follow the guy, but if you want to know where I got most of my theological opinions from, it usually comes from him. Usually. So, all right. Anyways, guys, I'm going to wrap up the stream tonight. I got something to finish later. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. Before we go, be sure to smash the like button. Smash that like button. What YouTuber used to always say that? What YouTuber would you say specifically smash that like button? Someone invented that. I don't remember who exactly invented that. But be sure to leave a like. If you want to get access to the exclusive Instagram lives over the past few nights, which are based, by the way, again, become a member. All right, become a member. They're going to be uploaded to the members tab soon. And if not, I'll see you guys later. Probably have some content on Friday or something like that. Have a good night, everybody. God bless you. And see you guys later. Alpha moves only. Peace.